you. Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. It's good to be back, isn't it? And it's an honour to be asked to speak to you this morning. For those of you who don't know me, as Andy said, my name is Hebe. I'm part of the family here at St Nick's. My husband Sam and I moved to Bristol over the summer, and it has been just such a joy to rediscover the city of Bristol, which is where I was born, and to make friends new and old. And we're just loving getting stuck in here at St Nick's, so thank you for making us feel so welcome. And I'm a hairdresser by trade, so I spend my days cutting, colouring, styling, foiling hair, and I've been lucky enough to work my way around quite a few of the St Nick's gals, actually. So if you're in need of a New Year trim, you know who to chat to at the end. But I'm not just here to shamelessly plug my hairdressing business. This morning I wanted to share some thoughts about how we might approach the new year and what it might look like for us to follow God's presence into 2025. Before I get started, about a week ago, we were sitting with Sam's family, kind of reflecting on Christmas and chatting about our plans for the coming year. And Sam mentioned to them that I would be preaching this morning. Everyone was being very supportive and encouraging and asking what I was going to be preaching on. And to be honest, at that point, I really hadn't had time to think about it, so I didn't really have an answer. So Luke, Sam's brother, asked me, okay then, so what's your preaching style then? Are you funny? Do you use humour or stories? And before I had the chance to answer for myself, Sam, without a moment's thought, declared, well, she's not killing the room, but she might win them over eventually. So let's see how we get on, shall we? I'm just going to pray as we get into it. Yeah, Lord Jesus, we thank you for your presence here today. Thank you for all that we've celebrated over Christmas, that you are Emmanuel, God with us. And we ask for you to come by your Spirit this morning and help us to know this truth even more deeply and to reflect on how we might follow you into and throughout 2025. Amen. Now, I don't know about you, but I am an absolute sucker for a fresh start. I love change. I love that feeling of fresh new things and clean slates. Now, I try to purchase second-hand clothes where possible, but there is just something about that new clothes feeling that is unbeatable. And Sam always makes fun of me because I keep the tags in my clothes for ages after I bought them because I just love prolonging that new feeling. And don't even get me started on a fresh new notebook. Like, there's so many just one-page done notebooks in my house. And so it will come as no surprise to you that I quite enjoy entering a new year. As soon as New Year's Eve is over, the 1st of January hits, I am like, get the Christmas decorations down, like clear the house, let's just embrace this fresh start. But while I love the excitement and the hope of a new beginning, I also feel the weight that this time of year can bring. There's a lot of pressure to set resolutions, to become a better version of ourselves, to be more, do more, read more, exercise more, spend less. Any of these sound familiar? And somehow start the year with everything perfectly together. And on top of that, there's often a sense of uncertainty about what lies ahead. Things we can't see, challenges we don't know how we're going to face, both personally and on a national and global scale. It's a lot, isn't it? Recently, as I was flicking through some year-long daily devotionals, I was trying to decide whether to embark on one or just to go on my own, which is, to be honest, quite a risky business for me. And I came across an introduction that really struck me, and it focused on Joshua chapter 3, and it made me pause. The story of the Israelites standing on the edge of the Jordan River, looking at the vast and flooded waters ahead, felt so relevant to this moment in the year. And I couldn't stop thinking about it, and that's what inspired me to dive into this passage with you today. So let's look at Joshua 3 together and consider what it can teach us about standing on the edge of the unknown and stepping into the year ahead with God leading the way. I think the verses are going to come up on the screen, and I don't think there are any Bibles out for you to take, so we'll stick with the screen. So, Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits between you and the ark. Do not go near it. Joshua told the people, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you." Joshua said to the priests, "Take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on ahead of the people." So they took it up and went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river." Joshua said to the Israelites, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites." Thank you very much. "See, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. As soon as the priests who carry the Ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap." So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the Ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the Sea of Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. So, I'm a bit out of breath after that. I'm going to attempt to briefly put this story into the wider context, so bear with me. So in this story, we see the Israelites camped at the River Jordan and having wandered the wilderness for 40 years. So the Israelites are the Jewish people, originally enslaved in Egypt, but through God's miraculous intervention, they were freed under the leadership of Moses. After escaping Egypt, they journeyed throughout the wilderness. And this journey should have taken like a few weeks, but instead it stretched out into about 4 decades due to their disobedience and lack of faith. Now, after this long and difficult period, they are led by a new leader, Joshua, who took over from Moses. And Joshua is tasked with leading them into the promised land, the land God had promised to give them as part of his covenant with Abraham. So that they have with them the Ark of the Covenant, one of the most sacred objects in the Old Testament, symbolizing God's presence, guidance, and his covenant relationship with his people. And by carrying it ahead of the people, it was a physical sign that God was leading them. The Israelites have been told in verses 3 and 4, "When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before." So the Israelites have followed the ark and finally reached this moment, the threshold of the promised land after a long wait. And now they must face the Jordan River, a seemingly impossible barrier between them and the fulfillment of God's promise. And to make things even more dramatic, the passage tells us that the river is at flood stage. To put this into perspective, the River Jordan is about the same size as the Severn River that we cross over on the bridge to Wales. So imagine that, but flooded with no bridge. And imagine about 2 million Israelites camped next to it, waiting for their next instruction. I think the population of Wales is about 3 million. So it's quite a lot of people, if you imagine that, like all just camped next to the river. I can imagine they were feeling a huge amount of uncertainty at this point. They're at a pretty big crossroads, and to anyone who didn't know the story that the Israelites had already been through and the promises of God, it probably would not have made any sense at all to wait there ready to cross. So I wonder what's going on for you at the moment. The start of a new year or a new season often feels like standing at the edge of a vast flowing river. There are challenges we already know about, perhaps ongoing things you're carrying into this new year. And maybe you've already set some New Year's resolutions or goals, but there are also challenges we don't know about yet, that we can't predict, and the unknowns that we'll encounter as the year unfolds. It can feel really daunting to step into that unknown, much like the Israelites standing on the edge of the Jordan, unsure of how they'll cross it. For me personally, this new year in particular holds a lot of excitement, as I'm currently 21 weeks pregnant. Thanks very much. I have always dreamt of being a mum, so there is so much to look forward to this year, and in many ways, this pregnancy has been a beautiful reminder of God's faithfulness to his promises in my life. But I'll admit, pregnancy is also a time filled with uncertainty and questions. Will everything go smoothly? Is mine and the baby's health okay? Will I be prepared for the challenges ahead? Will we be okay financially if I decide not to or can't go back to work very quickly? And mainly, how on earth is this baby going to get out? The mix of hope and fear, excitement and uncertainty is very real for us at the moment. And I'm reminded that, just like the Israelites, we don't know exactly what the future holds. But we can take comfort in the fact that, like the Israelites had the ark to go ahead of them and show them the way, God's presence still goes ahead of us. Even when we're standing at the edge of the unknown, we're not alone. So if we're called to follow God's presence, how do we do this if we have no physical representation of it in our lives? Like, I wish I had a massive ark chest thing to follow around. Like, that would be so much easier to know that God's with me. So how do we follow God's presence today? We may not have this physical ark to follow, but God still leads us through his word, through prayer, community, through scripture. We can hear God's voice guiding us in how to live and how to trust and how to face the challenges that lie ahead. Through prayer, we connect with God and seek his direction for our lives. And in community, we find support, encouragement, and a shared sense of God's leading as we walk through life together. Back in 2018, I was living in Bath. I was 22 and had recently qualified as a hairdresser, and I was itching for a new adventure. Some friends of mine who I'd met in London a few years before were also living in Bath, and they were doing some training ready to plant a new church. And about a year before they even knew where they were going to go and plant this church, I just knew that I was going to go with them. It was one of the clearest senses I've had. I barely even gave it much thought, which, looking back, was quite rogue from me. But I just knew this is what God is calling me into next. So by the time it came to summer 2018, I was ready. There were 6 of us who moved up from Bath to Liverpool, and we all found places to live. And some of us found jobs, some of us found it a little bit harder to find a job. And we started meeting on Thursday evenings to do church around the table. And it was a really exciting new adventure for us, and it did feel quite exhilarating. Now, I had been involved in the worship team back in our old church, occasionally singing backing vocals, but I felt up for the challenge of stepping up and doing a bit more leading. And my dad had given me his guitar to take up to Liverpool with us, and on which this guitar I had previously learned about 3 chords, because at one point when I was about 15, I really wanted to learn to play Bubbly by Colby Kalat. And so naturally, I became the sole worship leader of our church. And as you can imagine, it wasn't the smoothest journey ever. I often played the wrong chords of those 3 that I knew. I was limited in the songs I could play. I was really embarrassed that I didn't seem to be improving very much. And I got sick of the sound of my own voice. Any Friends fans in the room? You know Phoebe Buffay from Friends? We love Phoebe. But would we love her so much if she was leading worship at your church every Sunday? That was kind of how it felt. There were many times when I thought about throwing in the towel and giving up. When showing up to lead in those moments felt very much like a flooded river racing past me, and trying to cross it felt completely impossible and actually quite humiliating to do. And yet every time I would try to quit, like I would literally get my laptop out, write an email to the leaders to be like, guys, it's over between us all, like I'm leaving, we're not doing worship anymore, you can do Spotify. And it felt like in those moments, every time I got to that point, God would lead me back into it through chats with friends in my community and through times of prayer. And somehow I would find myself pushing through, picking up my guitar again. And God was so faithful in those times, as he was with the Israelites in the passage. God's presence would always go before me and pave the way for me. All I needed to do was to show up and follow him. Now, I'm not saying this led to amazing things quite like the crossing of the Jordan River. Like, I'm not about to release a worship album anytime soon, guys. But what it did in me was deep and formational. It taught me that I need not be afraid because God goes before me, and that wherever he leads me, I can trust him. Now, I was trying to think of another example of this idea of the presence going ahead in my life. And the one that I came up with is my evening routine, and I might regret telling you all of this. Now, I need to confess something. I hate going to bed. Don't get me wrong, I love sleep once I'm there, but the process of getting ready for bed is the absolute worst, in my opinion. Brushing my teeth feels like a chore. Washing my face inevitably ends with like cold water running down my wrists. And nothing compares to the misery of getting into a freezing cold bed when all I want to do is feel cozy. I feel like I'm showing myself up here, and it's going to get worse. My diva tendencies are going to be on display. Thankfully, my lovely husband, Sam, has come up with a solution to stop me from procrastinating going to bed for so long that I just give up entirely and just snooze on the sofa. Now, he goes up about 5 minutes before I do, gets ready for bed himself, and then climbs into my side of the bed with a hot water bottle to warm it up for me. It is honestly the kindest thing and the most diva thing, I think, about me. But it makes the whole process so much more bearable. His presence literally goes before me, so I don't have to fear. Now, if comparing him to the Ark of the Covenant doesn't get me brownie points, I don't know what will. It's a bit of an outrageous example, but it's also a comforting picture. Just like Sam's warm presence helps me face the dreaded bedtime routine, God's presence goes ahead of us into the unknown, preparing the way and reminding us that we're not alone. So, as we step into this new year, I want to ask you, where do you see God leading you this year? What are the areas of your life where you feel uncertain and need his guidance? Are you prepared to follow him even when the way ahead feels unclear or difficult? I hope to simply remind you this morning that wherever you're headed this year, you too are invited to follow God's presence, and you can trust that he will guide you through the unknown. Now in Joshua 3, in the verse 5, Joshua gives a clear instruction to the Israelites. Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. The word consecrate might feel familiar to some, quite unfamiliar to others in the room. But at its heart, it means to set yourself apart for God. It's about preparing yourself spiritually, examining your heart, surrendering distractions or sin, and dedicating yourself afresh to him. And what's striking about this in the passage is that their preparation was not about the Israelites' strength or strategy. They weren't asked to figure out how to cross this river, how to part it, or come up with any kind of plan about what they were going to do next. Their role was just simply to surrender themselves to God, trusting that he would do the miraculous. This act of consecration wasn't about what they could do for God, but about letting God work through them. So as we stand at the beginning of a new year, this idea of consecration feels deeply relevant. The new year gives us a natural opportunity to pause and reflect. What's the state of our hearts coming into 2025? Are there areas of sin, distraction, or weariness that are holding us back? Are there places we've grown complacent, or barriers that are keeping us from fully flourishing? One of my favourite ways to be honest about this for myself is through journaling. I'll often draw a series of dials in my journal, each representing a different area in my life. Things like my spiritual life, relationships, work, or even more specific areas like prayer, shame, or gratitude. And these dials give me a way to visually gauge where I'm thriving and where I might need God's help. For example, I might realize that my prayer dial is low because I've been too distracted, or that my relationships dial feels off because I've been holding on to resentment. And this simple exercise helps me to take stock of my heart and invite God into the areas where I need renewal. And sometimes that is as straightforward as confessing those things in prayer and asking God to realign my priorities. And other times it's about inviting someone else in, whether a friend, a mentor, someone in my community, to walk with me in those areas. So as we step into this new year, I want to invite you, if you would like to take a moment to consecrate yourself to God. What would it look like to set aside some time to reflect and pray? To ask God to show you where he wants to work in your life. Just like the Israelites, our strength isn't what will carry us forward. It's God's presence and his power that will make the difference. Let's prepare our hearts for the amazing things he might do among us this year. As I close, let's hold on to the encouragement God gave to Joshua a little bit further back than today's passage, which remains true for us today. Joshua 1 verse 9 says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." So whatever the year ahead holds, whether moments of joy, uncertainty, or challenge, remember that God's presence goes before you. You are not alone. Be strong, courageous, and consecrate yourself to him, trusting that he will guide you through the unknown and do amazing things among you. Let's step into 2025 together, following his lead, following his presence with faith and hope. Amen.